Hello everybody, it's me, GhostCritic, and here's Friday's video. It's late, but as promised, you're finally going to hear what I thought of the new introduction to the Sandman universe. Now, when I first heard about this series coming back, I did get quite excited about it, and the fact that there were going to be 4 brand new titles that kind of encompassed the Sandman universe got me even more kind of worked up, and I was thinking, oh, this is fantastic. Obviously those solicitations came a long time ago and I almost forgot about them, and then obviously gradually more information came out about them and who was working on them and when the actual release dates were going to be upon us. And now we know what the books are, now we know who all the creators are, and now we all know when the release dates are. So this is a new kind of segment to my channel where I am going to hold fire on these books. I'm putting in my usual comic book review video of a Monday and giving them their own video for each issue, which I will do kind of a week after. I know this has been 2, but I'm going to try and keep it to a week after they are released. So that gives me a time to read them and reread them. And I have to say, I've read this particular issue, the Sandman universe, this one shot, quite a few times, which is not necessarily to say I really enjoyed it. We will see, but there is just so much packed into this particular issue, and I'm sure there will be stuff to digest from these titles that I just wanted to give myself a little bit more time to gather my thoughts and put out a video worthy of what I have to say is my favourite run of comics of all time. I don't think there's any other title, any other run of comics that I've read and reread as many times as I have Neil Gaiman's The Sandman. So it's quite strange because when I started thinking about this, it occurred to me to a point was like, who is this for? And who is going to read it? Because we're talking about the original series that ended back over 22 years ago now, March 1996. The 75th issue of the original Sandman run came to its conclusion, and that was supposedly it for Neil Gaiman's run. And then of course you had all the spin-offs that came from that, so you had titles that were focused on the Endless, so Death, you had the Dead Boy Detectives, you had Sandman Mystery Theatre, and a slew of Under the Banner of Sandman Presents, focusing kind of mini-series focusing on certain characters within the Sandman universe. And of course, and we'll talk about it a little bit later, we had a series called The Dreaming. So they all played out, and then we didn't hear anything from the Sandman universe for a long time. Then Gaiman came back in 2013 and gave us a prequel of sorts with Sandman Overture, and he brought along J.H. Williams III, who did all the great artwork in them. And I have to say, it's not a series that I've come back to yet and reread. Not to say that I didn't enjoy it as I was reading it, but I haven't yet feel the urge or the impetus to go back to that just yet. But it's a strange, I guess it's almost a kind of niche book. Given its age, the style of storytelling, the style of artwork from back then is not necessary to everyone's taste. And with it being a fully fledged Vertigo title, there are worries given the state of Vertigo at the moment. It's not doing as well as it used to. The amount of titles coming out of that kind of sister imprint of DC isn't as big as it ever used to be. I mean, there used to be so many Vertigo titles, and I would hazard a guess that you could probably count on two hands how many Vertigo titles come out now. Hopefully these titles can boost Vertigo's profile up a bit, and hopefully get more creators interested in using that imprint again to tell some great stories that are kind of out of the DC continuity and play around with different genres and give it a bit of a more mature theme. So that kind of made me think, well, how long is this going to go on for? Are we going to see these series go on and on and on? But I just yet to discover who the audience is now for these books. I know obviously I am, because my comic book life, my history, my upbringing was greatly informed by this series. It made me see comics and the style of storytelling in a whole different light, and made me see other titles that generally I wouldn't even look at, but because of the Sandman, I gave them a chance, and I like to say I grew as a comic book reader, and hopefully had a little smidgen of sophistication when it came to my reading habits. One of the big questions that have been asked about this series is how new reader friendly the title is, and I have to say, no, it's not. And yes, it is. You can't go through kind of 30 odd years of this book existing in whatever form and hope to come to this title, however much of a primer it is for the new titles that are going to come out of it, and not be a bit confused about the characters and know everything there is about these characters' backstories. So kind of with that in mind, and at the same time, I don't feel like a new reader should be scared of picking this book up. It will hopefully open you up to the old stuff and go and read that and enjoy it and have the passion and the love for this title that I do. But what I thought we'd do to begin with is just as a kind of overall view, because the regular cover by Jay Lee is quite handy because it has a lot of the characters on it. Now, if you've got this, get it in your hand now so you can look through this with me, and I'm just going to go through all the characters that are on here and just maybe a little smidge of information about them. We'll start up here in the top right hand corner and kind of work our way round clockwise. So right at the top we have got Tim Hunter. Now he's going to be in one of these offshoot titles, the Books of Magic, so I'll hold off talking about him because I'm going to be talking about him later on in the video. Next to him we have Lucian. Now he's the librarian. He's kind of like the most loyal, I guess you call, staff member of the Dreaming, and Dream himself. He never gave up when the Sandman was captured for all those years. He kind of tried to keep the dreaming alive and not go to complete rack and ruin. So he's an incredibly loyal friend. he looks after this huge library that holds every book that's ever written, every book that's going to be written, and every book that has never been finished. Next to him, I think it's the Corinthian. I didn't spot him. I may have missed it. I don't think I did, but I don't believe he is actually in this particular issue. But he looks incredibly like the Corinthian with the dark shades on, and basically he's He's a nightmare in human form, and he's there. The dream obviously uses him to scare people within the dreaming. Next to him, the bird there, that is just as much a character as any of the others, and that's Matthew the Raven. I guess you could call him a confidant for Dream, for Morpheus. There have been many conversations between the two, and there's almost a kind of, Matthew acts almost like a conscience for Dream. For those of you who are unfamiliar with the actual character of Dream, Morpheus, he can be quite hot-headed, he can be quite arrogant and self-centered, and Matthew is almost the kind of little Jiminy Cricket character on the side, giving him some like wise words of wisdom. Next to him is the only character that I'm not really sure about. I'm guessing she's from The Dreaming, but it's Dora, and she appears to be human, but in the book, which I'll talk about, she does take on quite the monstrous visage. Next to her is Nuala. She was a gift to Morpheus from the fairy folk when he was thinking of retiring from being I guess the king of dreams. And then we have Lucifer. It's Lucifer, it's the devil. Next to him, the trio that is Cain, Abel and Goldie the Gargoyle. They are the proprietors, the landlords, I guess you'd call them, the owners of the House of Mystery and the House of Secrets. I think the woman that then follows is Eve. Eve being the kind of, I guess, the concept of the first mother in the book, the person who kind of birthed the population as we now are. She was the first mother. Then we get Mervyn the Pumpkinhead. He's the caretaker, though he never seems to do a great deal of work. And then, of course, finally, taking centre stage is our new Sandman, Daniel, who we will find out is lost at the moment, perhaps in more ways than one. So they are most of our cast of characters that we're going to see straight away in what is essentially a primer for these 4 books that are coming out after this. So we're going to take each one by one, talk a little about it, the creative team, some of the mysteries that seem to be unfolding in here, and I hope you enjoy it. So, as I said at the top of this video, the Sandman universe is basically a primer, an introduction to the 4 books that are the 4 titles that are going to be coming out on the Vertigo label, and hopefully bringing us some fantastic, great new stories with characters new and old. And the book basically is bookended by the first book that is due out, and that's The Dreaming. Now, The Dreaming was already a kind of offshoot title. I'm trying to remember how many issues it lasted. But basically it felt very much like a kind of anthology series, dipping into all the different characters from the Sandman universe, and then you used to get different artists and different writers on the book. And this is where I think, because I have started collecting it, it was a title that I came to very, very late, and I'm kind of trying to get the whole collection of that, but memory is a little bit failing, and there wasn't a great deal of information about her on the old internet, and this is about this character Dora. And this book seems to be focusing very much on 3, maybe 4 characters of Lucian, our librarian, Matthew the Raven, and this Dora character. Perhaps Mervin's going to go thrown in probably for a bit of humour and light relief from time to time. But yes, as I said, the dreaming in this book, in this one shot, kind of bookends the title, and it was strange coming back to the Sandman universe and seeing we've got Simon Spurrier and Bilquis Evely doing the creative work on this new title. And I said it was strange coming back to the world of the dreaming, because when I've always read the original series, it certainly had a very kind of gothic, kind of gloomy, a horror-y tinge to it that you don't see in this book straight away from the first page. Everything looks that much more kind of fantastical and dream-like, very peaceful, I'd say. As imaginative and as kind of wacky and psychedelic as it may look, there is no feeling of darkness here. And this may be because we have a new Sandman in this reincarnated state in the form of Damien, but it was somewhat of a little bit of a surprise to see the world of the domain of dream being so light and magical. I had that feeling of magic. But however, of course, for those of you who've read the book, there is an element of danger going on in here. We're not sure quite what yet, because we literally have a crack in the sky, which bodes the question, who made the crack, why is the crack there, what's behind the crack. And no one knows what to do, and you're kind of thinking, well, where's Dream? And our librarian Lucian explains to the cast as well as the reader that, you know, Dream is off on one of his walks, he could be a while, we're just going to try and sort this out themselves. However, he's obviously keeping stuff from our cast of characters, and the fact is that no one knows where Dream has gone. He's kind of lost, I guess you'd say. So it's kind of up to Matthew R. Raven to go out and find him. And basically Matthew acts as certainly as a constant to introduce all the other titles that go on in this book. So in the dreaming part of this storyline, for upcoming storylines, what mysteries are we going to have for this title? Obviously there's the crack, like I said. Who's behind this crack? How did it happen? What are the consequences of this crack? But there is also elements of characters that is acting very strangely. Lucian is forgetting things, he doesn't know where he is at times, and there is obviously something wrong with him, losing his mind perhaps, and it's not just his mind he's lost. As I said, Lucian is a librarian, and looks after this vast library, and he knows every single book within this library, and as he's walking along, kind of almost as a narrator reintroducing the dream world to us, the reader, he sees that there is a book missing. I tried, you know, when you start reading this book and you start reading it over and over again, you're trying to kind of hopefully spot clues, and while it's not explained what book is missing, you kind of have to try and read into certain aspects of it. As he's walking along and finds out that this book is missing, he mentions a couple of books before it. One is Le Génie de Flaubert, which was apparently going to be a huge volume of books written by the Marquis de Sade, but it was... it wasn't lost, I think it was burnt. The Marquis de Sade managed to write, I think, about the first 2 or 3 volumes of it, but they were burnt, so they were lost to the world and the literary genre, the literary medium, sorry. He then talks about a book called Worcester at War. Now, Worcester was a character written by P.J. Wodehouse, and again, I may not just have been using my Google powers of investigation properly, but I couldn't find a book called Worcester at War. And then he says this book that's missing is between, it's among the Sorcerer's Scrolls. So there's some sort of element of magic there, and I wondered, perhaps, is there a concept of these books either being lost, destroyed, never to be found? So what book could be within these Sorcerer's Scrolls? And my mind is still turning over, but this is great that this particular title, this particular part of the Sandman universe is already giving us questions and keeping us interested in this particular title within the universe. So as a starter for this book, I thought it was really good. The book ends, as I said, it's kind of bookended with the dreaming title. The crack, by the time Matthew comes back after introducing all the other books, it's got larger. It apparently has a heart, which I think it's Cain is stabbing away at. For, I guess, comedic effect, but it looks as though the dream doesn't want to be found. They have these kind of picture frames with their kind of, I guess you call them an avatar or a sigil that represents one of the kind of one of the endless, one of these godlike beings, and you can see a little kind of picture of one there. That's Dreams, which is obviously the kind of the gas mask type of hood adornment. And what they do, it's a bit like Skype. It's Skype for the gods. You go to the picture frame, you call out their name and ask for their assistance, and you know they might be on the other side and come and talk to you. But at the end of this book, we get the impression that perhaps our Sandman Damien doesn't want to be found, as we see it at the end on the floor, smashed. It's interesting because you can see in the background of both those panels I showed you the other frame showing the other Endless's sigils. Well, at least you can see one of them, which, bring it up close, hopefully you can perhaps see, or if you've got your own copy, and I believe that is Desire's sigil. And those two have always had altercations, the kind of, I guess, adventures that Sandman goes on from the original series. They've always, or pretty much always, had Desire at the root. Desire trying to make Dream do, I guess, bad things, or things that will ruin him. So I just wonder, showing only that other particular sigil, is it anything to do with her, him, it? Because there's a whole kind of androgynous sexual ambiguity about the character of Desire. So I really enjoyed this one. I'm very much looking forward to it. The art by Bill Evely was very nice to look at. I've not read that much Spurrier stuff. I've read bits of his X books and they've been okay, but we'll see. Now let's move on to the next book that we come across. Now, the second book that's going to be coming out in this series is The Books of Magic. Now, The Books of Magic started off back in 1993 as a 4-issue prestige series, and it eventually went on, and I can't believe I didn't know this, and now I look back on it, I do think it's quite strange, because I always thought the series stopped at issue 50, because there are only, I think there's, how many? 7 trades of this series, and it never occurred to me that there were any more, because that are the only trades I could find. But apparently this series went on for 75 issues, so I've not read 25 of them, and I feel quite silly and stupid for not knowing that. But basically what the universe of the Books of Magic is all about is Tim Hunter, who we saw on the cover, little boy up there, and it's basically all his adventures and his trials to become the greatest wizard ever known. Now this was quite strange, because again this is a title that has seen different iterations, different volumes throughout the years. We had obviously the 4-issue prestige series from the beginning, which turned into the 75-issue long run series that finished in 2000, I want to say. And then we had a series called The Age of Magic, and then we had, I think the last one was Life During Wartime, which saw him, I think he was really turning, it was late teens, probably turning into adulthood. And this is why this particular story that this is going to come out kind of shocked me a little, because it's clear that Tim Hunter is back at school. He looks more like a young teenager, and so yes, he's basically back to school, and we have a new teacher, this Dr. Rose. And straight away the kind of alarm bells are ringing, whether she obviously is going to be a big player in this particular title, but whether she is a friend or foe of Tim's is yet to be seen, as she hands him a book because he's late to school obviously, and all the other children are already reading from this book. He's dropped his at home, left it behind, to which our Dr. Rose gives her copy to him, but it's all blank, so mysterious stuff going on here. Easter egg, I guess you could say, in here, but the book that the rest of the class are actually reading from is Shakespeare's Midsummer's Night Dream. And for those of you who have read the original Sandman, there was a whole story centred around Midsummer's Night Dream. So I thought that was a nice little touch by the creative team of Cat Howard and Tom Fowler on this book. I really liked that. So it felt very short, it felt very quick, but it definitely kind of set up a sense of impending danger. The final scene of this kind of excerpt, this primer for the new title, was Tim leaving the classroom, obviously hidden to him by some magic. Is the dead body of his old teacher sprawled across the desk in a bloody mess. Now, we presume I guess that Dr. Rose has killed him and kind of done some sort of magical illusion so nobody can see the mess, or perhaps she is there as a protector and doesn't want him to see this bloody mess and worry him. So again, the great thing that has been about this primer is that it's kind of giving us some juice for upcoming titles. The only thing I didn't particularly like was, I'm afraid, Tom Fowler's art. It's kind of rough around the edges in bits. It's always difficult to kind of gauge the art when you have so many different styles in a primer book like this. And maybe I am just comparing it to Bilquis Evely's artwork from the first part of the book, which I guess is slightly unfair, and maybe I will warm to it more when it is a title just on its own and not really comparing it art-wise to the other titles. So yes, well interesting. I mean, Tim Hunter and the whole Books of Magic thing was another of the kind of Vertigo series, and obviously because it came out of in parts of the kind of Sandman universe. I really enjoyed. I like the idea of the whole magic of this young boy learning and getting to grips with a power that he doesn't necessarily want and doesn't really know how to use, and watching him kind of grow into adulthood and being able to do the most amazing things. So I'm, of the books, it's not the one I'm least looking forward to, but I am definitely willing to go back to that portion of the kind of the dreaming universe. So looking forward to that title coming up. The third book in our quartet of new titles in the Sandman universe is The House of Whispers. Yes, we've got a new house. It's a regular kind of idea in the DC universe anyway, but was used to great effect in the Sandman. But you had the House of Mystery and the House of Secrets, which were kind of DC's answer to all the kind of EC horror stories back in the day. And Gaiman used the two characters that used to introduce the stories within those comic books and thrust them into the universe of the Sandman. But here we've got a new house, and it's the House of Whispers. So all this is brand new, and let's be honest, there isn't a great deal to go on with this. We're basically introducing voodoo into the dream world. We are introduced to quite a few characters. We have Latoya and Maggie, the lovers, the two daughters, perhaps, or sisters, of Lumi and Habibi. And as I said, there's not really much to go on them in the book. They are just presented as new characters, letting these two kids know that they are together, they are in a relationship. The poor woman, I think it's Maggie, trying to endear herself to these kids, with one of them not really being happy about this relationship for whatever reason, trying to buy their love with presents, of which one of them is an alligator charm which she throws into the sea, which releases our alligator king from the charm, and who meets up with a character called Erzuli, who is a kind of Haitian spirit goddess. We find out, I did a little bit of digging, and these are actual kind of, well, they're mythological characters This alligator king character has been known as Uncle Monday. He was originally a medicine man from Africa, selling crocodile medicine, and he got involved. He was obviously captured and was trying to be forced into slavery, but he wouldn't obviously submit himself to that. So he kind of transformed himself into a crocodile and said, you know, when my people are all completely free, then I will return as the alligator king. So, and then we have this Azuli character who is a kind of Haitian goddess. This book certainly has a very feminine, I daren't use the word feminist, but it has a very feminine force behind it, and I think that is what we're going to see out of this particular title. And one of the things that turns up in this, there's another talk about books. There's a lot of things about books in here. Obviously we've got the missing book from the Dreaming. We had them reading out of Shakespeare in the Books of Magic, and we also he also had the book that had no writing in it. It was all blank. But in this particular portion of this issue, we have a weird book that our quartet of ladies are going back to the house to have a look at. So I'm sure something terrible and awful is going to come out of that. Creative team on this, the names kind of ring a bell, but I can't think of what they've done. Nalo Hopkinson and Dominique Statten. The artwork from them it looks good. I'm not adverse to this particular art style at all. I'm looking forward to delving into that and learning new stuff and new worlds and this new house of whispers. So the last title that we are introduced to within this one shot is Lucifer, and I'll be honest here, of all the kind of offshoots and kind of spin-offs from the Sandman universe, Lucifer is actually the only title I've never read anything about. So I'm going to be as new to this new title as perhaps a lot of you are, but I'm willing to dive right in there and just enjoy it and see what I can get out of it, and learn about this character. It's written by Don Waters and artwork by Sebastian and Max Fumara. These are names I don't think I know. And that's one of the things, I mean, apart from kind of Simon Spurrier and Bill Quasively, these are I don't like saying this, but they're not hugely well-known artists, certainly not in my sphere. You know, like I said, some of them I kind of know of, and perhaps have read or seen their work but not realised it was them. But I think it's good that they are not using, you know, the big well-known names to do this story. I think it helps, probably helps the narrative, gives a new fresh outlook and interpretation of our Sandman universes. So going back to the book, apparently Lucifer is missing as well. What is this about all these characters that are lost or missing? And basically he has been imprisoned by unknowables. We don't really know anything yet. And then there is this talk of a search for the mother of Lucifer's abandoned son. I think of all the books that we've been introduced to here, Lucifer certainly has the kind of the dark, gothic, gloomy tone that I was expecting. I won't say I was looking for, but I was expecting to see. The artwork, again, obviously it feels like it suits the book. It's going to be a kind of a horror tinged title, which I certainly think this particular character probably deserves. I don't really have a great deal to say about this, given that, you know, like I said, I don't really know this character too well, but it sets up an interesting tale. Who has captured Lucifer? Who is this abandoned child? I'm hooked, and for a title that I've never read, that's good going by my my estimation. So they are all the titles, and they are everything I thought about it. I don't know if I had really any expectations going into this particular series. I knew full well it wasn't going to be what I remembered and what my kind of love for the book was, and what I remember it as. I knew it wasn't going to be like that, and neither did I want it to be. It would have felt a little too hacky and too reliant on nostalgia. And I think Neil Gaiman has found himself some interesting people to write some intriguing stories, and I do hope that a lot of you out there will give these titles a go, even if you've never read a Sandman or a Sandman spin-off comic ever. Just give it a try. You might surprise yourself, and it might have you kind of spending all your money, your hard-earned wages, picking everything up in trade to read all the great old stuff, the original Neil Gaiman run, which I will always recommend. Anyone who ever says, I want to go into comics, what can I read? I don't care, I will just say the Sandman every time, because I just think it's a fantastic piece of work. But yes, give it a go. I'm going to be there with you every issue of the way. I'm going to do a video for every single issue. It's going to come out on a Friday the week after it is released, whatever issue it is. I think we start the beginning of September with the Books of Magic, and I'm excited. I hope you are too. I hope you enjoyed that. I hope you're looking forward to many more of these videos. I'm looking forward to making them. I'm very excited. I keep saying it. I am. These stories have got me my juices salivating for more, and hopefully I'll be dribbling all over the pages for months to come. That's a lovely image to leave you on. Until next time, bye bye.